We talked about this earlier in the week in terms of some of the anecdotal evidence coming out of Beijing. Now we're looking at a lot more posts coming from really lots of different places around the country saying that this isn't adding up. We also know that they've changed the way that they define COVID deaths too.
Yeah, I mean, they've basically admitted that they're going to be counting less deaths as from COVID. They introduced a much more narrow definition of what constitutes a COVID death. You have to die from a respiratory failure to be counted as a COVID death, which is very, very different to the way other countries do it. The US and UK, for example, they do split whether you die from COVID or with COVID, but the ultimate numbers are brought together. Other places, count your death from COVID if you're positive within, a month of dying. So this is a very, very narrow definition and pretty clear. What they're trying to do is portray that fewer people are dying than really are. You can die from a heart attack with COVID and won't be counted in the COVID numbers in China. But, the research is very clear that COVID can cause blood clots. It can cause things that cause other ailments and things that you die from. It's not high science.
What does this signal in terms of restrictions for COVID-19? If they're not counting as many deaths, does this mean that we're not going to see more restrictions and that exit from COVID zero is certain?
Yeah, I mean, we're very much beyond the period of restrictions. They've turned their back on COVID zero. They're almost sort of trying to revise history that it even really existed. And now the rhetoric is all about how mild COVID is, how mild Omicron is, how we can get through this. And at the same time, they're basically erasing from the public record any sort of data or statistics around it. So that it's really hard to get a clear picture on what is actually happening in China. We're hearing about factory workers and other people being told to go back to work, even with COVID. They definitely seem to have turned the page on COVID zero, and it's all about getting through this very, very fast, no matter what the costs are, and getting back to economic growth.
At the same time, the sheer impact is still going to play out regardless of whether it's acknowledged in propaganda or not, right? We're hearing the likes of Chongqing saying that if you've got mild symptoms, you can still go into the workplace. That's obviously not going to help with the spread either. And I was just looking at the latest vaccination data, Emma. Over 80s is still just about 40%.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very clear, given that they haven't moved and haven't really done enough when it comes to elderly vaccination, that you are going to see a lot of older people die. The estimates are around 1 million people die in China, and these will mostly be old and vulnerable people. But you are seeing the impact, as you say. Volkswagen, for example, has had to ask a smaller group of workers to work much longer hours and double shifts because of an outbreak within the factory there. We've seen outbreaks in BMW's factory, and they've had to do similar things, cordoning people off just to keep production going. At the same time, some factories are giving workers the sort of signal, if you don't tell us you have COVID, that's fine, you can still come in. And that's very, very dangerous, though, right? While most people might get mild or not so intense symptoms, somebody can go home, convey it to an elderly parent or a grandparent, and that leads to a death. So we are going to see, disruption, whether China sort of tries to hide that or not.